When Jimmy Haslam hesitates to confirm Kevin Stefanski's future, it says a lot more than the Browns' front office might admit. While Shedeur Sanders faced public scrutiny for his performance in a tough loss, the real breakdown came from the top. Stefanski's sideline decisions were riddled with inconsistencies, clock mismanagement, and baffling two-point conversion calls.
If you're into the real story and all the messy twists they don't show on highlight reels, go ahead and subscribe. And if you're sticking around to see how this Browns QB chaos plays out, you should definitely be subscribed.
But what turned this from bad coaching to something worse was his post-game behavior. Asked directly about delaying Sanders' start, Stefanski refused to own it. Asked about the wristband debacle, he gave answers that seemed to dodge the obvious. For a franchise quarterback in development, this level of instability is not just damaging, it's dangerous. Instead of support, Sanders is surrounded by mixed messages and strategic chaos. And yet, his response has been steady, composed, and professional. Where Stefanski deflects, Sanders takes accountability. Where leadership is missing, Sanders supplies it himself. That role reversal, rookie as stabilizer, coach as liability, should be setting off alarms in Cleveland. If Haslam is serious about building around his young quarterback, he'll need to act decisively. Because what's unfolding isn't just a slump or a slow start. It's a leadership vacuum threatening to waste the team's best hope for the future. Kevin Stefanski's coaching career might have just taken a sharp left turn, and not because of another loss on the scoreboard. It's what happened after the Browns' latest defeat to the Chicago Bears that sent shockwaves across the NFL. This wasn't just a bad game. It was a messy, public unraveling of trust between a head coach and his quarterback, and it left fans wondering, was this really just a mistake or something a lot darker? The focus of the fallout? A wristband. Or more accurately, a malfunctioning wristband that completely derailed Shedeur Sanders' ability to manage plays during a critical game. Stefanski's response to the situation was anything but reassuring. When asked about what went wrong, he gave a soft, non-committal answer about miscommunication. But Sanders himself? He came out and said that the play card fell out of the wristband. That's not a miscommunication. That's a disaster. And the conflicting stories between coach and quarterback immediately raised a red flag. Because when your rookie QB gets publicly humiliated on the field and the coach can't, or won't, explain why, something isn't adding up. This isn't just about a lost card. This is about intent. It's about whether Stefanski is actually invested in Sanders' development, or if he's quietly trying to protect his own reputation at all costs. And that question keeps coming up for a reason. Take a step back. Look at the bigger pattern. Stefanski has been under pressure for a while now, and every decision lately feels like it's been made with one goal in mind: saving face. Instead of building a game plan around Sanders' strengths, he delays his start. Instead of easing him into the system with support, he drops him into a high-stakes game and lets a critical piece of equipment fail. Then, when things go wrong, he dodges any responsibility and leaves the media and the fans to connect the dots. It doesn't feel like bad luck anymore. It feels like a setup. And when Stefanski was asked directly if it was a mistake not to start Sanders earlier, his response was even more telling. He didn't give a yes or a no. He didn't show any regret. He just avoided the question altogether. That silence spoke volumes. Because acknowledging that it was a mistake would mean admitting he made the wrong call, something he's clearly not willing to do. That's not leadership. That's damage control. And meanwhile, Shedeur Sanders has been nothing but professional. He's been calm, mature, and accountable, even when he's being left to clean up messes he didn't cause. He's taken blame when he didn't have to. He's answered questions his coach avoided. He's shown every sign of being the kind of quarterback you build a franchise around. But instead of support, he's getting undercut. Game after game, we've seen Stefanski make decisions that don't just feel risky, they feel reckless. Going for two-point conversions when a field goal could tie the game. Mismanaging the clock in critical moments. Making substitutions that leave fans shaking their heads. It's a kind of coaching that doesn't give your players the tools to succeed. And when the quarterback is already under a microscope, It becomes clear who's being set up to take the fall. That's what makes the wristband situation so alarming. Because if Stefanski knew it was broken or failed to ensure it was working properly, and still sent Sanders out there, what does that say about his priorities? When you combine that with the refusal to acknowledge the timing mistake, the repeated strategic failures, and the vague post-game interviews, it starts to feel less like incompetence and more like a coordinated effort to protect the coach's image, even if it means sacrificing a rookie's development. That's where the allegations of sabotage come into play. And frankly, it's not hard to see why. This isn't just about a single play or a single loss. It's about a growing pattern of undermining behavior. And the one person who keeps coming out of it looking worse and worse is the head coach. To make matters worse, the Browns organization isn't exactly stepping in to clean things up. Owner Jimmy Haslam has reportedly remained undecided about Stefanski's future, leaving the entire coaching staff in limbo. That uncertainty is now bleeding into the locker room and onto the field. When your players don't know if the coach is even going to be here next season, how are they supposed to trust that he has their best interests in mind? That instability is dangerous, especially for a young quarterback still trying to find his footing. If Stefanski is trying to manipulate the narrative around Sanders' readiness or use his struggles to justify earlier decisions, it's not just unethical. It's harmful. It could derail a career before it ever really starts. And the contrast couldn't be clearer. On one side, you've got a quarterback showing poise, accountability, and growth under pressure. On the other, you've got a coach who can't answer basic questions about the most talked about mistake of the game. That's not a quarterback-coach relationship. That's a power imbalance. At this point, the Browns have a decision to make. Are they going to keep backing a coach whose leadership has come under serious scrutiny? Or are they going to start protecting the one player who's shown actual potential through this mess? Because if this continues, if Sanders keeps getting thrown into unstable situations while the coach ducks accountability, the damage could be long-term. Not just for Sanders, but for the team as a whole. They're risking the future of the franchise on a coach who may not even be around next season. There's still time to course correct. But it requires ownership to stop sitting on the fence. It requires acknowledging that something is deeply wrong with how this team is being led. And it requires choosing the player over the ego of a head coach who clearly has something to hide. Because you don't fix a broken system by pretending it's working. You fix it by ripping out the parts that are holding everything else back. So now it's your turn. Do you think Kevin Stefanski has been sabotaging Shedeur Sanders to save himself? Or is this just another example of a coach in over his head? Drop your thoughts in the comments. Share this with someone who's been watching the Browns spiral. And make sure you're subscribed. We've got more mess, more receipts, and more accountability coming soon. The Browns organization may still be acting like this is just another rough patch, but the writing is already on the wall. This isn't just a team struggling with execution. It's a team being quietly, but methodically, torn apart from within. And at the heart of the dysfunction sits Kevin Stefanski, arms folded, ducking questions, dodging blame, and quite possibly running a playbook that has less to do with winning games and more to do with saving face. Let's call it what it is, a slow burn implosion. Shedeur Sanders, the rookie with poise, potential, and the maturity of a veteran, has been tossed into one of the most unstable environments possible for a young quarterback. But instead of being surrounded by mentorship and strategy, he's been saddled with confusion, a bizarre lack of communication, and a head coach who can't seem to decide whether to develop him or distance himself from him. That wristband malfunction wasn't just a momentary hiccup. It was the turning point. For any quarterback, especially a rookie, in-game rhythm and communication with the sideline is everything. When your wristband, the literal device that contains the plays, isn't functioning correctly, it's not just inconvenient. It's sabotage. Full stop. And no, that word isn't being used lightly here. Because Stefanski didn't just fail to fix the issue, he failed to acknowledge it. He let the narrative swirl. He gave the kind of half answer that makes you squint and think, wait, what really happened here? When your quarterback says the card fell out, and you respond by vaguely blaming communication, you're not clarifying anything. You're clouding it. That's not leadership. That's obfuscation. And at this point, Stefanski has practically made it an art form. It's no longer a question of whether Stefanski is a questionable coach. It's a question of what lengths he's willing to go to maintain his image. Because his behavior isn't just evasive, it's calculated. And if you've been watching this unfold from the beginning, none of this is surprising. Stefanski's leadership has followed a clear and concerning trajectory. Let's recap. First, he delays Sanders' debut without offering a clear reason. Then, when Sanders finally starts, he's handed a malfunctioning wristband in a high-pressure game. The coach refuses to take any accountability for it. And when asked directly whether it was a mistake to not start Sanders earlier, he refuses to answer altogether. This isn't just mismanagement. It's strategic negligence. Because if Sanders had started earlier and thrived, it would have directly contradicted Stefanski's decision to keep him benched. And if it turned out that Stefanski had been holding back a star quarterback without valid reason, the backlash wouldn't just be about one mistake. It would be a condemnation of his entire approach. So, instead, Stefanski chose the route that protects him. Keep Sanders out long enough that any mistakes can be pinned on inexperience. Blame the losses on growing pains. If Sanders struggles, Stefanski gets to say, "See? He wasn't ready." And if Sanders succeeds, well, that'll be spun as excellent coaching development. Either way, Stefanski keeps control of the narrative. But here's the problem. Players see through that. And fans? They're not stupid. The double talk, the contradictions, the complete unwillingness to own a single bad call. It's exhausting. And Shedeur Sanders? He's stuck trying to rise above all of it. Despite being put in impossible situations, he continues to show maturity beyond his years. He doesn't lash out. He doesn't use the media to air grievances. He takes responsibility when he doesn't have to and stays laser-focused on improving. It's a textbook example of what you want in a franchise quarterback. But how can he thrive when his own coaching staff seems to be dragging him down? Let's not forget the in-game decisions. The two-point conversions when a field goal would do. The mismanagement of the clock. The complete inability to adjust the offense when it's clear that Sanders isn't being set up to succeed. These aren't just coaching errors. They're repeated choices that put the rookie quarterback in worse and worse positions. And every time something goes wrong, Stefanski either ghosts the responsibility or shrugs it off. What makes this worse is the silence from ownership. Jimmy Haslam's ongoing indecision about Stefanski's future has created a void. And in that void, all the wrong people are stepping in to fill the space, mainly Stefanski, trying to spin this season into something it's not. He's not guiding the team through adversity. He's managing optics. And while he's doing that, Sanders is being left to carry the weight of not just a broken offense, but a broken chain of command. So here we are, a quarterback doing everything right, and a coach doing everything possible not to be held accountable. This team isn't being held back by talent. It's being held back by a coach more committed to protecting himself than building anything real. And that's the core of this controversy. The Browns aren't losing because Sanders is underperforming. They're losing because the infrastructure around him is built on weak leadership and blame shifting. You cannot develop a star player in an environment where accountability is optional. You cannot win games when your coach is more focused on sidestepping tough questions than solving obvious problems. And you cannot build a future when the present is being manipulated to serve one man's professional survival. There's still a chance to fix this. But not while Stefanski is calling the shots unchecked. Not while ownership sits on their hands hoping things settle down. And certainly not while Sanders is being subtly set up to fail. The Browns need to decide what kind of team they want to be. One that protects ego, or one that protects its players. Because right now, Sanders is standing alone at the center of a storm he didn't create. And he deserves better than a coach who won't even say whether keeping him on the bench was a mistake. So what happens next? Will the Browns double down on dysfunction, or finally step in before things spiral even further? Will Stefanski continue trying to run out the clock on accountability, Or will someone finally blow the whistle? That decision could define not just this season, but the entire trajectory of Sanders' career. And that's what's really at stake here. Not just wins and losses, not just media narratives, but the future of a young quarterback who's shown every sign of greatness, if only he's given a fair chance to show it. All right, let's not sugarcoat it. We are now watching one of the most quietly chaotic quarterback-coach dynamics unfold in real time. And the worst part? It's happening to a player who deserves so much better. At this point, the conversation around Shedeur Sanders and Kevin Stefanski has gone far beyond stats, game footage, or coaching philosophies. This isn't about whether Sanders completed enough passes. It's not about whether the Browns ran the ball enough. It's about something much more damaging: trust. Or, more accurately, the total erosion of it. Because when you really look at the sequence of events, it doesn't look like bad luck. It looks like a calculated fall guy strategy. Let's walk it through again. Kevin Stefanski benches Shedeur Sanders for most of the season, despite increasing pressure to give him reps. Fine, that happens. Teams are cautious with rookie quarterbacks. But when he finally does give him the start, after plenty of games that screamed for a spark, it's against the Bears in a high-pressure situation where one bad quarter could ruin the public perception of this kid's future. Then the wristband situation happens. Not miscommunication. Not a technical hiccup. The actual play card, the literal tool Sanders uses to get the plays, falls out. And instead of fixing the issue or at least stepping in with clear, direct support, Stefanski gives a vague, foggy answer postgame, downplaying the incident, while Sanders gives a straightforward account. Right there, you have a credibility gap. Stefanski isn't just being unclear. He's actively making the situation more confusing. That's not mismanagement anymore, that's a strategy. Because a real leader, when a rookie quarterback struggles in his first high-pressure start due to an equipment failure, owns that. Immediately, loudly, publicly. He says, that's on us. We failed him. But that's not what Stefanski did. He left just enough ambiguity in the air to let Sanders take the hit without having to actually say it. That's manipulation, not coaching. And then came the press conference where Stefanski was asked, point blank, if he regretted not starting Sanders earlier. That question should have been a gimme, a yes or no, a moment of reflection. But instead, Stefanski gave one of the most passive non-answers of the season. No accountability, no regret, no hint of responsibility, just dodging. Why? Because acknowledging that it was a mistake to bench Sanders earlier would mean admitting he made the wrong call. And if he made the wrong call, that opens the door to every other decision being questioned. It pokes holes in his judgment, his priorities, and the image he's trying to maintain as someone in control. But the truth is, Stefanski has not been in control. The Browns' game plans are erratic. The play calling is confusing. The clock management has been shaky. And now he's on the verge of completely losing the locker room. Not because he's yelling or being too hard on players, but because they can see what he's doing. They see the favoritism. They see the deflections. And most importantly, they see who's getting thrown under the bus when things go wrong. And Shedeur Sanders? He's not blind to it either. Yet he's still showing up to every press conference with the same level-headed professionalism. He's still answering questions that his coach should be answering. He's still keeping his head down, owning his role, and doing everything in his power to prove that he belongs in this league. But that can only go so far when the system around you is crumbling. It's hard enough to be a rookie quarterback in the NFL. The pressure, the expectations, the spotlight. But when your own coaching staff isn't protecting you, when they're actively putting you in situations designed to test your limits without giving you the tools to succeed, that's sabotage. Whether it's intentional or a byproduct of ego, the result is the same. And the people who suffer are the players. It's not just Sanders. The entire offense looks like it's operating without clarity. There's no consistency, no rhythm. And when Sanders does try to lead, he's surrounded by dysfunction. Now let's talk about ownership. Jimmy Haslam has remained weirdly quiet throughout all of this. There's been no real public stance on Stefanski's performance, no vote of confidence, and no clear signal about what direction the franchise is heading. That kind of silence is dangerous. Because when leadership doesn't speak, it creates a vacuum. And right now, Stefanski is filling that vacuum with spin. He's positioning himself as the stable hand in a messy season, hoping the front office buys into the idea that he's the one keeping things together, when in reality, he's the one creating the instability. This is what happens when a coach starts playing politics instead of playing to win. Every vague answer, every delayed decision, every communication issue, it all serves one purpose: protecting Kevin Stefanski. Not developing Shedeur Sanders. Not winning games. Not building a team. Just self-preservation. And if that's what the Browns are building their future on, they're in serious trouble. Because Shedeur Sanders is the future. That's the real tragedy here. They have a player who, despite everything, is still showing resilience, still showing maturity, and still showing flashes of the potential that could define the next era of Cleveland football. But talent doesn't flourish in dysfunction. And right now, dysfunction is all Stefanski seems capable of delivering. This entire saga has laid bare what happens when leadership puts ego above development. When coaching becomes about optics instead of outcomes. When the person in charge refuses to take responsibility for the mess unfolding on his watch. And unless something changes soon, the Browns are going to do what they've done far too many times before, waste a generational talent because they were too slow to cut ties with the problem standing in his way. So here's what needs to happen. The Browns need to take a long, hard look at where they are right now and where they want to go. And if the vision includes Shedeur Sanders leading this team for years to come, then they need to ask themselves, is Kevin Stefanski the coach who can get him there? Because right now, the answer looks more like a no than anything else. It's not personal. It's just clear. You cannot build a franchise around a quarterback who's constantly looking over his shoulder, wondering if his coach is really in his corner. You cannot develop trust in an environment where leadership refuses to answer the simplest, most important questions. And you definitely can't grow when every mistake gets papered over with deflection instead of accountability. So now it's on the front office. Do they step in and make the hard choice to reset the culture around Sanders? Or do they keep letting Stefanski rewrite the narrative, one vague press conference at a time? Let us know where you stand. Are you seeing the sabotage pattern? Is it time for Stefanski to go? Or is this all being blown out of proportion? Drop your thoughts below, hit that like button if you're tired of coaches ducking responsibility, and share this with someone who needs to understand the real story behind the Browns' dysfunction. And make sure you're subscribed. We're tracking every twist, every press conference, and every move that could make or break the future of this team. Because Shedeur Sanders deserves better. And if Cleveland won't give it to him, someone else will.